So welcome everybody back here at Veil of Sound, and yes, with once again a regular Sunday interview. As we didn't have one on last Sunday, but this one I'm very, very happy about. Not only because we already had those two people on the show, not only have they released a brilliant album, because also, first of all, and most of all for me, they're two of my favorite expats living in Germany, Dana Schechter and Tim Wiskita. So, folks, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, thank you.
Before anybody asks, the record that we're talking about is, of course, the new record by Insect Ark that I hope by now everybody has checked out. It's called Raw Blood Singing. Is it 7 or 8? It's 8 tracks. 8 tracks, and it's really well done. So first of all, we have already been talking about this before, but you two have been touring a lot lately. So let me ask, when did this record take place? When did you start writing, recording? When did all of that happen amidst all of that touring?
Well, we recorded it in April of 2023. And the writing for that happened the 2 years subsequent to that. I mean, mostly in 2022, which was still sort of tail end of COVID. And shortly after Tim had moved to Berlin, I was already living here, and we started working on the material for the new record, as well as putting together a live set just to get back out there. And there wasn't a lot of competition schedule-wise for either of us at that point, because Swans was not busy and Khanate was not busy. So it allowed us to really focus on the material, and we spent a lot of time just ripping apart some of the music I had written as demos and just find a way to reimagine it. And that process took, the better part of a year. And then so we recorded it in Greece in April of 2023.
Mm-hmm. Is there a particular reason why you chose Greece? Is there a special studio that you wanted to record in, or did you just want to jump into the ocean after recording?
We didn't go into the ocean at all, if I remember correctly. Yeah, there was a studio in Athens called Unreal Studios that we wanted to work at with Nikos Yagoudakis, which was sort of the co-producer on the album, and at the time was our band manager, and he had worked quite a lot at that studio and had shown us so their website and played us some of the work they had done. And it seemed like a really great opportunity to go work at a very high-end studio with a lower cost that would work within our budget. And we liked the idea of going somewhere else to record it, so we went to Athens for that.
So was that also a moment where you could completely and fully concentrate on just recording?
Yeah, while we were there, that's all we did every day.
Okay. Well, of course, I can understand that, you go somewhere, you want to get this done in a certain amount of time. Of course, At the same time, one also has to say that the record in no way at all feels like a rushed recording. It's very well done. And therefore, that is definitely an achievement that you can be proud of, as well as of the songs in general. I really like the songs. And here we come to what I feel about the record when listening to it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that it has a much more gothic feel than the previous Insect Ark records.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I was a teenager. After I was a metalhead into thrash metal, I got into goth at around like 17. I don't know, Tim, were you into goth?
Look at him. He still is.
Yeah, I look that way. I'm not sure. I was listening to some goth type music, but you wouldn't catch me at the goth club, dressed in the fun.
You know who my hero was? This fell off the wall the other day. So I've had this poster.
Yeah.
Well, Alice Cooper from the 70s was a huge musical influence for me. And talk about like, this guy had it all. Glam, goth, you know, not the later stuff. So he's always been a huge inspiration for me. Yeah, 1977, you know.
Interesting.
So like
You
for
go on.
me, like the intersection of goth for me is like Alice Cooper and the Cramps and Bauhaus, stuff like that. So not really, not so much on the like Sisters of Mercy style stuff. I like stuff that actually had its roots in blues, actually.
Okay.
Like deep roots, not obvious roots.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would have guessed that there is some Anathema, some Paradise Lost, some more metalish gothic in there.
No. I mean, maybe that's just, if that's your association, what you get from it, it's totally fine. But no, those are not bands that I really listen to. I don't know, Tim, if you listen to those bands, but
No, I'm familiar with them, but I don't know their music that well.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the goth thing, I think, is just also when you add vocals to dark music, that's, you know, melodic. It can just kind of go in that direction. Although I don't think that we didn't set out like, oh, let's make this, you know, sound like a goth record at all. I think it's just, I mean, it was such an organic process of coming up with this music, and how it changed once Tim got involved was pretty extreme. And, you know, we of course have tendencies from, you know, being involved in bands, multiple bands for so many years, but I haven't done anything except for really dark music in a long time. So it's not surprising that one facet of that might be a little gothy, but that's, you know, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, where my association comes from is that there it's true, there is something in the vocals that you do deliver that is somewhat reminding me of, I don't want to say a classical female goth singer, because it's not, you don't sound like, I don't know, Nightwish or something like that. But there is something in there where it feels, I'm very sure there is no echo effect or no hall on it, like reverberating the voice into like in a church. But it sometimes feel as if the perfect location for this record would be a desecrated church, you know, like to make it even more obvious, like less lighting, more candles. That's what I felt. And that is something that I really like about the record. It's a new kind of sound to Insect Ark. Do you think that also has to do with Tim's involvement? That it's even more, or no, that it's a little less only Dana and a little bit more a complete band?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know, Tim, I'd like to have you explain more about your involvement in the process, but I can say that, you know, from my experience that, well, Tim is by far the most involved of any of the band members I've ever had in Insect Ark as far as writing. And even though I wrote the chord progressions and the melodies, Tim's strengths in arrangement and his instincts in you know, listening to these demos I had made and really honing in on certain parts of them. And, you know, we would have these discussions where he would say, like, that riff is really good. In your demo, you're only doing it once, but what if we just repeat that riff multiple times? Or what if we extract this and this piece is maybe not so good? And so we really got in and dug through it and sort of tossed the stuff that was filler. And that's something that, even though with Andy Patterson and with Ashley Spungen, they both had involvement, of course, at varying levels with their creative ideas. Certainly, Tim's instincts as a musician and as an arranger came through really strong. And then also Tim's playing is very distinct, and that is a huge part of the difference in the sound. So I don't know, Tim, if you want to talk about that, but
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started playing with Dana and we talked about doing the records, I went into it like I knew that Dana had kind of demos with even drum parts, on there that she'd done on a drum machine or, whatever software you had. And, initially I was kind of expecting to pretty closely replicate whatever drum parts she had. But once we started digging in, I started having more drum ideas and then more ideas about just the music in general. And Dana was very open to just more fully collaborating on it. So what went from me kind of thinking I'd play drums on Dana's record kind of became more, it had more of the feeling of, hey, let's make a record together, kind of like a full-on collaboration.
Mhm.
So yeah, like Dana said, I started kind of just digging in and letting her know what I thought were the strongest parts of her ideas. We centered in on them, kind of cut away anything that seemed to, distract from the strength of these ideas. And we didn't set out initially to have any specific elements, I think, within the music, but for me, early on, I started looking at this as, for a long while, I'd kind of had this idea of, I kind of like in music, these kind of like infectious, hooky type things, catchy type, things that is often found in pop music and of course other music forms. But, the problem in pop music for me is that the music is pretty boring. So there'd be this one element maybe of pop music that was appealing in some way, and the rest, wasn't my thing. But, being into experimental music for, most of my life and playing that kind of music, I'd always kind of thought about how can you kind of maybe join these two things, like kind of this hookiness, so to speak, of, of certain types of music, and then a kind of more avant-garde approach, to the music. And, I started, and Dana and I talked about it a lot, kind of started like seeing this within what we were doing, where there's a way to kind of marry these two things. And, for me, I think that's what we ended up with at the end. Got these, like, when we were working on the songs, I knew we were onto something because I would come home and there'd be some piece of the music that would just be stuck in my head for days, it's just
Which
this,
is a cool thing, right? Yeah.
yeah, this like catchy quality where it's like, God, I can't even get this out of my head for days. It just keeps going and going. And yeah, we kind of just, I think, respected that and kept the power of that within the songs, without trying to put too much in there that would distract from those elements, of the music.
It's very interesting that you say that. When listening to the record, I think the record is, I do not want to say the most accessible Insect Ark record, but it's definitely very accessible. But at the same time, it never, even after several spins, it never becomes boring, because that is basically what pop music is to a lot of us, I think. You're hooked on for like 10 seconds, you play it a second time and it's okay, and you play it a third time and then it's like, ah, that. But with this record, it definitely feels as if you can listen, and I did that. I listened to it like more than a dozen times, and just like Tim described, there are parts on the record that you just don't get out of your head. But let's then ask that, like, how difficult was it for you to also find out how you can make this record a little, because I'm very sure you did not set out to try to make it accessible. But I could imagine you said like, okay, this is a cool thing that we should repeat, like a hook or something. Was it hard for you to pinpoint those elements that now constitute the accessibility of a record?
I don't think it was hard at all.
Cool.
I don't know. I think it was pretty obvious because we spent a lot of time talking about stuff and trying stuff, and we would record our rehearsals on our phones and go home and listen to it at night, and then go back the next day and just fine tune it. And I think both of us while we have a healthy dose of, learning how to analyze something and then, step away from it and re-experience it, not while you're actually playing the instruments. I think both of us work very much on instinct and trusting your own sense of what is good and what's not, and not spending too much time over analyzing, just going like, this is good, this is solid, this is strong. Because what we're trying to do is make strong, interesting, music that is affects you on some sort of very primal level. And you can break it down from there, say like, well, there's minimalism, there's dissonance, there's obviously melody, there's rhythm, there's all these elements that are very easy to use as descriptive terms. But at its heart, what we wanted to do was make something that was really strong. And strong can be totally devoid of melody and hooks. It's just, this is the way that it developed. And we decided to just go for it. And I was willing to see what happened. And I welcomed the chance to make it something different than I had started out with, because I'm not that interested in, I don't get a medal in life for being like, yeah, well, this was totally under my control and it was my thing. Like, maybe when I started Insect Ark as a solo thing and I was doing everything alone, that was important to me, to have this sense of ownership, because I had been coming from collaborative things that were not really working. So I wanted to see, could I do it alone? But I've now, this is the 4th studio album. And then there's another like 5 EPs and 7 inches. So a lot of, there's a lot of stuff. I've proven to myself that I can trust my judgment. And when Tim and I started working together, I was like, man, this shit is on fire. Like what we could do together. Like this, I'm a huge fan of a lot of the bands Tim has been in and as in his playing. And I thought like, this is an amazing opportunity for this thing to change into something else. And I was really welcoming of it. And I think that inspiration is what propelled us into coming up with what we ended up with.
I totally understand that. And it's also interesting that both of you who have been working with many bands, we've already mentioned, Dana working with Swans, and Tim, of course, being the drummer for Khanate and many other bands. It's interesting that you two, who have already collaborated with so many other people, now get together and seem to also cherish the experience that the other one had with these big names. So I think, is there also a little bit about like, you don't have to prove yourself to the other?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly helps if you're walking into a situation and you already have respect for each other for what you've done. Yeah, it does eliminate any part of the process of showing anything off. Like, I don't have to show Dana that I really know how to play drums. She's heard it and she doesn't have to prove anything to me. I've heard it. So it certainly, gets rid of that hurdle in the process, because it is true what you're saying. Sometimes if you get together to play with somebody and you're not familiar with each other's approach, you get the person maybe trying to show off too much, and that's not very good for making powerful songs. It's good for somebody showing their chops, but there's plenty of that out there if anybody wants to look at people's chops. We're more interested in making powerful pieces of music than proving how great we are on our instruments,
Yeah.
And it's not that we didn't know each other or play together before this. Actually, when I lived in New York still, we did a live film score together. And we were friends for, quite some years, and hung out regularly and talked about playing. And it's just, it being New York, just the logistics of doing anything is just so complicated, and the timing is so short that we didn't manage to do it. but so it's not like we didn't know each other and that Tim just sort of like arrived in Berlin and then we met and then, you know, I auditioned him or something like that. It was, you know.
But although I would love to see that one, you know, like you saying like, okay, Mr. Whiskita, well, can you play this number of beats in a minute?
Yeah, there was none of that.
No, but I do think that, you know, the history of the music that Tim's been working on, certainly, you know, it was brought in as a creative element to what I was already doing and everything that I've come from. And so, because we trust each other and trust each other's skills and experience, there's a lot of things that just don't have, that you can just basically just be like, that's, yeah, we don't even have to discuss that. We have an understanding about how things work and how the music scene exists. And it helps not just even in making the music, but also in making decisions about how we want to work with this band and what we want to do, and knowing what we're sort of up against, let's say, in the current scene of how the music world is working and the complications of being an independent band that is not easily slotted into a genre, you know. And this is fine, but it does take some extra work if you have a stoner rock band, for example. This opens up certain doors to you very easily, for example, or if you're in a technical death metal band or whatever the case may be. You don't have to be quite as clever about, you know, finding places that you can work, let's say, because I find it very interesting, the predisposition to trying to come up with genre categories. And
which is very difficult.
People trying to figure out where to place you. And I wonder why that's so important, because this is something that comes up a lot as we're talking to people about this album. People say like, well, you know, where do you fit? And I'm like, well, why does it even matter? I mean, it's almost that people only need to define things so that they could like explain it to somebody else. But why do you even need to do that? Well, we know why, because word of mouth is really important when you're trying to get music out there. And if people say like, well, it's like this and a little bit like this, and they're thinking like, what? Like that, I don't understand that. But if you say like, it sounds like this band and this band and this band, then you go, oh, cool, yeah, maybe I would like that.
I mean, like coming from the other side, I can see
a
the
little
necessity of
disappointing
genres.
people's need to simplify things. I just wish people could, you know, listen to something, and if they like it, why do they have to analyze it? But that's just me, because I don't care about genres. I'm listening
totally
to
get that.
classical metal the same day, you know, and Brian Eno, like.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Dana. It's just I think that because of the sheer unsurmountable amount of music out there, I think people tend to look for genres that they like in order to know, okay, if this is a sludge record, if I know already this is a sludge record, then okay, the probability I'm gonna like it is XYZ. Whereas if it's like a synthwave record, I know, okay, it's synthwave, I don't even have to deal with it. Even though, of course, in both genres, there might be soundscapes that you totally dislike. I think it's just this sheer amount of music out there that we can never get through, that people tend to use the genres as like a little help. Although, of course, I totally get that. When a band sets out, you never set out to make a gothic record. Of course not.
Well, some people do. I think actually a lot of people set out to make music in a specific style, and there's totally nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's what somebody wants to do and they do it well, then that's a measure of success. If you have an idea and you set out to achieve it, then in the end you're like, here it is. I have the thing. Yeah, I made it. You know, and that's totally cool. I have no problem with that. That's not my interest, and that's not Tim's interest either. And it's just it just gets a little bit frustrating, I guess, because it comes up so often. And I think oversimplifying any kind of creative work is a bit, I don't know.
I think it's also difficult if you have bands like the bands that you've worked with or with Insect Ark. It's very hard to pinpoint it. I would also never say that the music you make is Gothic. I just say there are a few elements in there that I associate with it, although I know it's not meant to be. It's still, in a way, very doomy. It takes its time. I mean, like, if I remember correctly, the longest track is what, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, something like that. And if we disregard the interlude or the intro, let's put it like that, then the shortest one is nearly 5 minutes. So, you know, you as a band never fit into the radio probability, and that's already a cool thing.
But you know what's funny is that some people have, as we've started doing interviews, some people have said that they think this music is really accessible and catchy and almost poppy. And then another interview I did where they said, well, there's like almost, you know, there's no sense of song structure at all. Like it's totally like, and I was like, all right, so there you go, there you have it. Like it's just has to do with somebody else, you know, their specific place they're coming from. Again,
and the worst thing is I'm in the middle. I'm totally in the middle. I say, like, it is accessible, it has certain elements, but it's not as if somebody has tried to make a pop record. You know, even though Tim, of course, would have liked you to turn into like a Gothic bar Britney Jones, you know, Britney Spears, of course.
Yeah, not quite.
Then you'd be Ken, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you work on music, or at least when we work on music, it's easy after the fact to kind of apply a narrative and say you're aiming for this or that. And maybe that happens to some extent, but in reality, we're just kind of following our tastes, you know, through the whole process. And if you have a diverse range of influences, you know, your taste is going to push you in these different directions, and you know the outcome is what it was without you know, we certainly didn't set out to make a, like, you know, catchy or whatever record, but you know, just again, our tastes led us in that direction, you know.
And let me guess, even if one of you says like, oh, I think here a little bit of Bauhaus would fit, even if you said that, even, you know, it would never turn out a clear post-punk thing, because both of you have a different understanding of what that means in comparison, for example, probably to me.
Well, we would just play it. You know what I mean? Like, instead of me saying like, hey, Tim, what if we did something, you know, fill in the blank, right? Like something, you know, like, can you do like a black metal beat? You know, instead of saying that, I would just say like, what if you did some like double kick on this? You know what I mean? Like, instead of like using the genre or a band as reference, we would just say like, yeah, why don't you play quarter notes or eighth notes, or why don't you play something that's got you know, more rhythmic variation or whatever. But so we don't use the genres as descriptions either. And like Tim said, you know, we have these very wide ranging kinds of music that we listen to, and since we do approach it sort of this very like intuitive way, it just becomes what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's in a way like, if you don't trust yourself as a musician and you don't trust yourself as a writer, then it takes a really long time to get stuff done. And that's fine. That's also another process. This is not dissing. So if that's somebody's process, that if they want to spend a year writing a piece of music, that's fine, because that's what they're after. But I think that we both really like this sense of immediacy when you hear something and you feel it, or like with art and you see it and it has a very strong impact and it makes you feel something, then that's a sign like, okay, we're doing this right. So and that's a process that I have got more and more comfortable with.
It's interesting that both of you say that it's a very instinctive process, and at the same time you are able to tell the other with technical terms what you think might be a good idea here. It's a very interesting mix.
Yeah, because let's say I'm playing something on the bass or on the lap steel, and Tim's doing something rhythmic, and we're just trying an idea, and he might say, like, what would happen if you did that arpeggio like twice as fast?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would help it feel less like it's dragging, because maybe we'll say, like, oh, we like this, but it seems like it's a little sluggish, but we don't want to. So then Tim, being a drummer who spent a lot of time thinking about rudiments and things like this and divisions of space, might make a suggestion like that. Like, if your right hand does a picking pattern that's different, or what did he say? Like, or I could go do something, on the hi-hat double time while keeping everything else straight time, and then that gives a little bit of a lift to it. So we're able to look at it based on, like, well, what does it need to feel right? So it's shorthand,
Yeah, it's interesting, yes. But that again, that is like the result of a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. Yeah, I can see that. As you've been speaking, and I would like to take that little bait, because you've dropped the word technical death metal, I would like to take the chance and ask those New York connections that you had. That's probably also the reason why Colin is on the record, right?
Yeah, because of the New York connection.
Not mine. No, because like Colin is living, isn't he living in or close to New York? And I guess from the scene that you know each other from there.
Yeah. His studio was in Queens. It is now closed just recently. But yeah, I've known Colin for over 20 years. Played with, spanned dysrhythmia in Philadelphia over 20 years ago, and I've known him since. He tracked part of the Khanate record. He, tracked vocals, percussion. And then, of course, Insect Ark, the album The Vanishing, Dana recorded with Colin. So, I mean, we have kind of a long history with Colin going back. And that's why we worked with him, because we knew him and we knew that he would be the right person to work with, partially because Colin's very good at listening to kind of what you're trying to achieve, I think, and knowing how to do it, rather than trying to push his way of doing things. Like, he kind of really listens to what you're going for and figures out quickly how to achieve that. So for me, at least, that was one of the big reasons to work with him, because Dana and I have pretty strong, after doing this for quite a long time, we have a pretty strong idea of how we would like things to sound. And, if we worked with somebody who just wanted the band to stay out of it and do that themselves, it would not go well, so. And, at the same time, while we had a lot of ideas, Colin was incredibly helpful. He made suggestions and took things beyond what we even thought, in terms of, we really wanted to use the stereo field to a great extent. And Colin really dug in on that. We wanted to have a lot of depth in the recording where, I have a lot of foreground and background elements. And, Colin was pretty masterful at figuring out where to place what and, how to get this kind of, wide, deep sound field, that we wanted, and organizing it in a way that made sense,
And it was recorded with that in mind. The recordings themselves that were done in Athens were really, really pristine, and just they did an incredible job. So Colin had really great stuff to work with. And keep in mind, well, it's actually not something we've mentioned that much, but Colin, we worked with him remotely, which was new. I had never mixed an album with anybody remotely before, and it just had to do with circumstance and timing, and also that mixing can take a little while, and he was pretty busy, so it wasn't that he did it in a block of time. So he would, work for a week, then he had to go on tour for a week, and so it wouldn't have made sense for us to fly from Berlin to New York to mix the album. So we really needed somebody who we had both worked with and had, a very natural sense of communication with, so that we say like, oh, I think it's a little like this, that it doesn't turn into this long extended thing. They go, okay, got it. And you say something to him, and then the next version is like, yep, he got it. So that was really important for us, and I think it worked really well.
It sounds amazing. And by the way, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about the new Dysrhythmia record, you can also check out, I think it's the interview like 4 weeks ago when we spoke to Kevin from Dysrhythmia about the new record, Coffin of Conviction. So yeah, it's very understandable. And I also like the way that, whenever Colin does something like that, it's once again one of those musicians who knows how to add something without trying to show off. So we're back at this, it's like, what do I have to give to make the song better, and not what do I have to give to make me look better. It's definitely something that I like about his work.
Yeah, he did make one. He did actually end up playing synths on like one transition of one song, on a song on the album called Inverted Whirlpool. There was a section where it's an instrumental song, and I did all the synths on the record except for this one part that Colin did, and then Ville, who plays in Aranci Pazuzu, played on 3 songs as well, in addition to the stuff that I had done. And the thing that Colin did was this one transition from like this one section of the song's like this swirling thing, and then it transitions into this other beat. And he was like, I feel like I could really use something there. And it was the only sort of time where he's like, maybe I'm out of line, but I think you could use something like this. And I was like, man, try it, because he's got all these steps. And he was like, he just like knocked this thing out. It was maybe like 40 seconds long, and I was like, it's perfect. And so we used it, So his instincts are incredible, and his level of musicianship is just, mind blowing. So obviously trust him a lot.
So we've been talking about the music now a lot. What we haven't talked about is, I feel as if there is a certain concept behind the record. I mean, the title sounds very programmatic, raw blood singing. So I figure that, Dana, you're the one who writes the lyrics, right?
Yeah.
And is there an overarching theme to the record, or an overarching idea?
Yes, there is. It's not so much about that the lyrics defined the concept as that the concept actually exists whether there is music or not for it. And in that, I mean that we talked a lot about our feelings about being a human on Earth and what that means these days, and what's even the point of any of it. And there are some cross sections and things that we both think about being alive at this point on the planet, and one of the ways to describe that was evolution. And evolution of sort of in a personal sense, and on a sort of global scale, or in a universal sense over time. And the idea that just, we're just like these spots of energy that exist for like a flash, and then there's nothing. It is related in a way to some of the ideas that I had talked about with The Vanishing, the previous album, which was really about this sense of impermanence, and of, that at any second, this is all just dust, right? So it is related to that in a way, but so there's evolution. You can see it in a literal sense or in a figurative sense, but there's also the idea in it of the evolution of this project, and that what we have done has made the project evolve, the music has evolved, the band has evolved. But there is this feeling that we share and have spoken a lot about, just saying like, well, you go through your life trying to make good decisions, but well, you're just like in the big suit. It kind of gives you a sense of like calmness, that don't take it all so seriously, and like to be here and be present, because this is what it is. This is what we have right now. And it's very easy to get distracted in life and wondering about, well, what does it mean, or what do we do, or where do we go, and ambitions and drives. And then you think, well, what about just existing? And it's just this fight against like modern life, the way that it programs us to always strive and angle for some kind of bigger picture. And I know that I am not immune from this, but I personally strive every day to remain present, to be here to experience this, because I know that at any moment it could just all be gone.
Is then the record also like one of those moments where you were able to really focus on something, focus on this thing, turn this into, I don't want to say a living thing because for various reasons, but focus on bringing this to life?
Yeah, I mean, we were able to focus on it in a bigger way than I ever have on most albums I've played on, purely because the circumstances, like the pandemic was still kind of going, and Dana and I were able to work on this record for it was like somewhere between 9 months and a year, I think, of us like just working on the music before we even stepped into the studio. And we were doing it almost daily for like almost the entirety of each day. So yeah, it allowed us to like kind of live this music entirely. There was very little else we were doing. I'd get up in the morning, have breakfast, go to the rehearsal studio. We'd work all day, come home, eat some more food, listen back to what we had worked on, come up with ideas. The next day, go in, try the ideas. And, Dana was doing the same. And we were able to just, work on this music in a way when normal life is happening. It's not so easy to dedicate that much time, to it. So, yeah.
Is that then also your way of dealing with it, or was that then also in a way your way of dealing with that tail end of COVID, of a pandemic?
Yeah, sure. Because with a lot of COVID, there were so many doubts if it was ever going to come back, and nobody knew. I mean, it was really a time of great uncertainty for everybody on the planet. And as artists, we came to realize that the fragility of the where we can exist, it's even more reliant on everything working together than we even thought of. And how the whole business got sort of taken down, as little pieces, or all these different pieces of how things work started falling out. We realized like, oh yeah, this whole structure, like if independent promoters can't put on shows, then this divide between big and small, there's like no middle class, let's say, and if you want to use like a common statement. And no, if the promoters can't afford to put on shows of music they like, then only big acts will exist. And these people, all the tour managers, all the sound people, the people that run backline companies that have vehicles, the bartenders, the managers, the booking agents, like everybody basically had to come up with other ideas. And so as we were writing this music, a lot of people had dropped out because they just saw like, okay, this is the end of it. And it was really good to have something to focus on during this time that had personal meaning, because in an absence of an understanding of where you're going to go with your time, at least then you say, well, I'm doing something that is satisfying to me, that is at the core of what I care about, is creating art, creating music. And in the end, well, if you can do that with your time, then you, well, I won't say you, but I'm speaking for myself personally, that's what I want to do. And also for us, not being, both of us being expats and living in Germany and having a greatly simplified life in many ways, being outside of New York, it reinforces the ability to stay focused on art in a way that I think neither of us were able to when we lived in New York.
I have one last question before we come to the quickfire round. I'm hoping that we can make this work just like it worked last time with a certain band called Khanate, where Mr. Whiskida and I were talking about possible live appearances. So what are the plans for bringing all of this onto stages across Europe, across the globe?
Tim?
Well, we just did the record release show here in Berlin last week. And other than that, we have, I'm not sure exactly which ones are confirmed yet, but there's like 5 or 6 festival dates around Europe. You know, Amplifest, I know, is confirmed, Portugal. What else is confirmed, Dana? I keep on getting confused with what's confirmed and what isn't.
We're playing a festival called Red Smoke Festival in Poland, and yeah, it's just a series of scattered shows, because the record just came out last week. Everything will always be posted on our website, and we are intending to tour within Europe, within the UK, within the US, other places if possible. We also have a third band member now for the live shows. So we're working
now to bring this into place, when Mr. Whiskida and I were talking, we were talking about a possible performance at I do not want to drop the name of a festival, but a certain festival next year. And I just want to ask, how open would you be to performing in Holland in April?
Well, yes, we like
for it.
So Walter, if you see this, bring these 2 guys and the third live member onto stage. I want to see that at 014.
It sounds good to me. The Khanate experience was great. Like, it's, you know, the Roadburn staff is always excellent, and it's always a good vibe there.
Don't drop the name.
You have
Oh yeah.
Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. But anyway, yeah, of course, everybody knows which festival I mean, and I think, honestly, I think that is also a record that in full would be perfect for that certain festival. Because what I like about it is, yeah, it might have no song structures. Yes, it might be pretty accessible, but at the end of it all, none of the 3 of us care about those terms. I think we all care about the fact that it's just awesome music. And that is, I think, the most important.
Thanks, Torsten. You're
welcome. But of course, the little roasting at the end of every interview shall not be forgotten. So I had a problem preparing those questions for the both of you, because Dana has already done 2 interviews with Veil of Sound, 1 written and 1 video interview. If you want to find those, look at our archives. Mr. Whiskida did 1 last year in August. So I really had to come up with something new, and I hope I did. So I have 6 questions that both of you please answer. Let's start off with something easy. As you're living in Berlin, would you rather go and see a show at SO36 or at Berghain?
I'd probably rather go to Berghain. Yeah.
Dana?
SO36.
Good. Yeah, I would also probably choose SO36.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
getting
because I have a few
into
very cool memories of watching them there.
yeah.
I could do
Although,
with the attitude from the doorman at Berghain, to be honest. I do like the space in there.
yeah, the
And
space is cool, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. One of my favorite experiences, live experience that I ever had was in Berlin at Kato when I watched Converge play, and that was a club where you had to walk steps and steps and steps until you were basically under the subway, and Converge were just ripping it apart. That was one of my best live experiences ever. I know we've been talking about Gothic way too much, but I will give you two classical Gothic novels. Frankenstein versus Dracula. Which one did you enjoy, or do you think you could enjoy more?
I think I like Frankenstein more than Dracula.
Yeah, I think I'm with Dana too. You know, everybody's into the Dracula thing. Frankenstein's a bit more of a outsider freak. I always appreciate that more.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the background story is, of course, cool, you know.
Yeah, and who doesn't love the movie Young Frankenstein?
Yes.
That's
Yes. Although I have to say that Frankenstein movie with Brenner and De Niro didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I don't think I saw that one.
Yeah, don't do it. You are living in Berlin, which is, I guess, a hotspot for a lot of, especially American tourists at the moment, because Berlin is just a cool city. If you could give your fellow Americans an advice on which other European city to visit, would you rather suggest Vienna or Hamburg?
I would say Vienna. Even though I've not been to Vienna, but I've been to Hamburg.
That is like nearly a very disrespectful. Oh my goodness. Okay, Ms. Schechter, what do you say?
Vienna. I lived in Vienna for a few months.
Oh, didn't you do a theater thing there though?
Yeah, I was playing in the Volkstheater with Paul Wallfisch, doing music for a play. And the Volkstheater is a beautiful, it's the state theater, one of the two state theaters. And so I was going back and forth a lot and living there. And it's a really beautiful city, and it is filled with culture and art. So that alone, I think, puts it at the top of many European cities. Just if you're an art lover and you care about culture, this is a great place to go.
So let's turn to music. Bauhaus versus Susie and the Banshees.
Well, I know what my answer is.
Yeah, it's kind of a toss-up. I guess Bauhaus. You're going to go with the opposite, Dana, aren't you?
No. Definitely Bauhaus. Because Bauhaus was freaky and scary, and the kinds of sounds they were getting were just like totally bent my brain. Susie is great, of course, but for me, Bauhaus was on repeat.
Something for the technical metal lovers amongst us. Gorguts versus Krellis.
Oh, those guys are friends. You can't, they're all like share members. You can't pit them
Okay,
against
let's put it like that. If you were to put on a record right now,
and we only had those two records.
Yes, you only have Gorguts versus Krellis. You can choose any record by any of those two bands, but it must be a Gorguts or a Krellis record.
Yeah, I would go with Krellis. Yeah. They're I'm friends with pretty much all those guys, but that's not the only reason. I just I can't say I'm so familiar with Gorguts, music. I've heard it before, and it's like impressive, of course, what they're pulling off. But yeah, I don't know. Krellis strikes my fancy a little more.
Well, Tim's putting on the Krellis record, so I'm going to put on the Gorguts record. because
That's a
then we
very good idea.
test both.
That's it. And for all those Gorguts fans out there, you should go and check out our interview with Mr. Hoofnagel from a few weeks ago. You might get some information on Gorguts that you will like. And the last one. I know you, I'm very sure, I don't know, but I'm very sure that both of you like Nick Cave. And if you had to choose, which record would you put on? Murder Ballads or Push the Sky Away?
Murder Ballads.
Neither of those are my favorite Nick Cave records.
Yeah.
Okay, which one would you then put on?
I like the old ones. I like the early. If you're talking about Bad Seeds, or you're talking about
Birthday Party.
Birthday Party? I mean, this is a.
Let's stick to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Yeah. I actually liked Your Funeral, My Trial quite a lot.
That's a good one.
That's one of my ones.
Yeah.
That was them at their. Yeah, I saw them back then. Actually, that was something to behold. Yeah, that era. Yeah, that era I think is, and even before that. But Murder Ballads, I like it, but it was starting to get kind of soft and ballady then at that point, and that's. I like the stuff that had a little bit more raw, sort of desperate.
Oh, you mean raw blood singing?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick Cave did what a lot of people do, where, you know, when an artist has been around for a while and they're, you know, lauded for their lyrics and, you know, how great their lyrics are, they start to really make that the central focus, and the music in a way becomes a bit secondary. Where I feel like with his earlier music, there was this powerful combination of this interesting music with the vocals. And it's sort of become this thing now where it's just like, you know, just about his lyrics and his voice, and the music sounds like it's kind of a secondary thing that's, you know, at least for my perception of it, you know.
There is definitely something to that. I can totally understand that. And
yeah,
I also think that partially has to do with the success of his books. And then again, the question is, are the books successful because they're that well written, or are they successful because they're by Nick Cave? But nevertheless, I think, I'm pretty sure that nowadays he also sees himself more of a connoisseur, of a writer, of probably
and
a
poet.
performer.
And a performer.
Definitely. Yeah. And his performances are always great.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that, you know, watching the way that band has changed over time has been pretty interesting. I was just talking about that earlier today. I mean, I think my favorite one is probably From Her to Eternity, which is really early, and that has some
86, 87.
classic, some songs on there just like nobody has ever matched them for me.
Yeah.
You know, and that was where I went after I was like this sort of goth kid. Like when I got into more like grown-up music, that was my gateway, was actually Bad Seeds.
Oh, that is interesting, because I can see that had an appeal to some goth kids at that time.
Yeah.
I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah. The ones over the age of, you know, 30, they were like, oh, here's this thing, and it's, you know, it's quieter and it's more scary. It's less energetic, but really, really unusual sounds that they got.
Yeah. So both of you, thank you very much for doing this, and of course, thank you for, again, an amazing record. Everybody out there who has not yet listened to it, sit down with your headphones, good headphones, please. It's only 45 minutes, but it feels like much, much longer. And if you listen to it on repeat, there is this wonderful moment when you don't know when the record ends and when the record starts. And that is something that I love a lot about it. It has a wonderful flow. And so thank you for that. If you like what we do here, then maybe check it out on our socials. Maybe check us out on our Patreon. We're always happy if somebody donates there. And otherwise, for the two of you, enjoy the rest of the Berlin sunny afternoon, I hope.
Thank you so much for having us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
So, hope to see you on stage this year. And until then, take good care.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.